In this video, we're going to take a look at a green ink by Robert Oster Light Green. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, it really does help me out for you to check out the entire video. Also, down in the description is a link to the green ink playlist, so if you wanted to see more, you can find that there. I'm an ink guy. Let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. I have to start by saying how much darker this really is on camera than in person. I have to look at the screen in order to really be able to read this. Now, we have no feathering, no spread. We do get shading that shows up in the stub, medium, and extra fine. The stub, extra fine, and medium. Again, if I'm looking down, it gets harder to see. The extra fine took 10 seconds to dry, while the medium took 12. The scrubbies for both do show a lot of color variation, and it really is there. And the difference between what I'm getting on camera and what I get in my eye is, for instance, the word brown. I can see where the B is and the N is, but the middle of the word brown in person is much harder to see. The smear test says you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a D-like Alpha with a medium nib was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. No bleeding, no ghosting. We have no feather, no spread, no shadings coming through in the stub, but there is halo throughout a lot of it. The extra fine has some shading that shows up and some halo that shows up in those darker areas. And the same thing happens with the medium. There is some shading and some haloing that occurs. Now, myself, strangely, this is the easiest paper for me to see this writing on, although on camera it looks lighter than it did on the Clairfontaine. The extra fine took 16 seconds to dry, while the medium took 19. The scrubby for both gave no color variation, but it's definitely there in the writing. In a smear test, you do not stand a chance of recovery at all if you smear while you're writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A lot of ink is put down, it's put into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we're seeing the classic yellow and blue makes green. There's yellow at the bottom, and as it pushes up and you see that green in the middle, that's where it's actually mixed with the blue line we're seeing at the top. Now, the one on the right that's allowed to dry for 10 minutes, you know what we see? No difference, which means no resistance for this ink whatsoever. The last writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. No bleeding, no ghosting. No feather, no spread. There is shading in the stub. There is shading in the extra fine and in the medium. It shades very well for what you can see of it. Now, the extra fine is a little lighter than the medium, and the medium's about the same tone as the stub. The extra fine took 11 seconds to dry, while the medium took 14. Scrubby for both do show some color variation, and it's definitely there in the writing, and the smear test you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink could be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. This smear's allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it gets a little bit lighter than it does in the rest of the writing. I suppose you could use it if you wanted to be able to go back and highlight in a note-taking situation. I just wouldn't. Now, the thing is, when I'm looking at the swatch, I do wish that the writing showed up as the darker tones that we see here, but unfortunately, most of it shows up as a little bit lighter than what we're mostly seeing as the lighter tones here. Water is completely reactivating and lifting this off the paper. I placed the paper towel back down and put some of that ink sort of back down on it. Same thing happened with the pen flush. So it is completely removing it. It did completely remove it from my pen with only water. What's not going to be needed is the 1/3 bleach solution, and without a doubt, it destroys it. Now, there actually are additional writing samples. I just can't bear to do them. really is quite painful. And it's got probably more to do with all the lighting that's around, so I get a lot reflected back at my eyes. I'm just not going to do it. For the inks tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Robert Oster's Light Green has a viscosity of 1.37, making this a wet ink. And for the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Robert Oster's Light Green has an average dry time of 14 seconds, making it normal. So instead of finding inks that look like Robert Oster's Light Green, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I decided to go with a Noodler's Magenta ink, Black Swan, and Australian Rose. Now, if you'd prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are links to those playlists. So what do I think of Robert Oster's Light Green? This is horrifically light, and I can't see using it. So what nib and pen will give the best writing experience with this ink? Now, you're able to see from when I was trying to take the notes, it, for me, was incredibly light and too light to really use. I had to take my notes using an entirely different ink. So, in order to be able to see it, you really need to use a fire hose of a pen. And even then, I'm not sure of what you're going to get with it, because I just can't go back and do more work with this ink. I hope you got something out of this video, and in the next video, we're going to take a look at Ackerman's number 11.